Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Country Living. Today we want to finish off last week's video, which was on transplanting. Today we'll be doing seeding, and then we want to get into talking about why we transplant and why we seed certain things. So if this is something that you're interested in, stick around because we're going to get right into it in just a second. Okay, so it's seed time, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a bed here that we've prepped. We've gone over that with the Clydesdale and the Eco Harrow, and she's good to go. So really important when you're doing seeding is to have a fine tilth. The finer the better, and we don't have to be deep. So you know, for you no-till guys, you can be looking at just 20 to 30 mil deep, so you're not disturbing your subsoil. So it's true that the top bit might be a little bit finer than you'd like, but all in all, you still keep to get all your subsoil in its intact position. So we're going to seed here our salad mix. Now our salad mix, sorry, not all our salad mix. So our salad nova is transplanted, but we'll do our baby beets, our baby spinach. We'll do our Misuna, and then we have wanted to try a new product that we never tried before. It's Rocket. So what we've done is gone to local hardware shop or whatever and got a couple of packets. We'll just do a short section. It was something that we've never grown here before, but a couple of our clients have asked us for it, so we're going to do that. Now I'll show you over here. This is one of our old salad mix beds. It's been harvested I think once or twice already. That's a Misuna down there, and that's the baby spinach. What we found is it's really good to plant them really close together. So you can see we've got 5 rows here on a bed, and that there, once they get up, it decreases the weed pressure. We have a couple of dedicated beds that only grow salad mix, and we keep the weeds keep the beds really clean from weeds, because you really don't want to deal with weed pressure in them beds. Like if you're going to have a weedy bed or whatever. So with our weeding schedule, number one, they have to be weeded every week sort of thing, whereas your broccoli and stuff, you can be a little bit more, you're not so worried about them, because once they get big like this, they're just going to choke out the weeds from the sunlight, So we got one bed here, one bed there, and one bed there. This one here's got a little bit of weeds in it. It's been left a bit unlooked after, and our main plot of salad mix is back up over here, and we tarp that all summertime just to keep them weeds out. So we've got our bed here. Now with our seeding schedule, I'm going to do a separate video. Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to do a separate video, but I'm thinking to do a separate video just in our seeding schedule and our planting schedule, just so you guys can know how our thought process and rationale behind that. But here in this bed here, we typically plant every 2 weeks, our seeding and transplanting schedule, because if you do it every week, it's too intensive, and it's not really warranted. So we do work our maths backwards. I don't know if you guys ever seen the Market Gardner book. He's got a lot of details on there on that, but I'll probably do a video on it, just going over similar sort of a concept. So we seed or transplant every 2 weeks. So that means we've got 1 week off where we got that other day for other jobs around the farm. So every 2 weeks we plant one full bed, and that gives us, we'll harvest half that bed 1 week and half the bed the next week, and then we'll have another bed that's coming up, that succession. So we calculate depending on demand onto how much we plant. So we'll go a third, but this week we'll probably go like just a little bit under a third, and do just like 1/10 of the bed, maybe a meter of Rocket, just to test that, and that might be something we add into our mix down the track. So we've got our seeds here, I just said to you, and then over here we've got our transplanter. So we'll be using the Yang the Yang seeder. Yeah, pretty well every time I use it I say I'm not the biggest fan, and that's because I'm not, but what do, it is pretty well all there is on the market right now, and so we run with it. First of all, I'm going to do this Rocket because I don't know how much we've got. I'm going to pull our little seeding bin out. When I seed, I always seed like heaps and heaps for the salad mix, because you want it really close, really jam-packed, as I mentioned. That's the dog drinking some water. Anyway, So I've got them really thickly planted, and I'll just plant this first little bit with that. I'll just tear all these packets open. I'm pretty happy with that. We really only use our seeder for our salad mix, so we leave it set up pretty well all the time. Sorry. Okay, so I'll just do, I said about 1 metre, but I'll just plant the first sprinkler, which is, I don't know, 2 metres or 2.5 metres or so of the rocket, and then we'll do the rest. Right, so that's our 5 rows of rocket. I think the Americans call it arugula, but yeah, we call it rocket. There's like 3 seeds left. Okay, next thing, just want to clean that out a bit. We'll go Misuna. Don't know if you guys knew, but you can use this little lid on the back of the, how did I do it? I usually use this thing, the corner. You can flick it underneath your tin lids to open it. So put a stack of Misuna in there. Okay, so that's our seeding done. Now we want to talk about the whys of transplanting and the whys of seeding. So there's 2 forms of seeding, hand seeding or with a seeder, like a Yang or Earthway or whatever you want. Then you've got transplanting. You can either use plugs, which is manual again, or the paper pot transplanter, which is semi-automatic. Then you can use your plugs with your water wheel transplanters, blah blah blah. But that's really not applicable to anyone in the smaller market garden size because they're just really big, expensive implements. So for anyone in you know, sub 2 acres sort of transplanting, and seeding, that's really all there is. So I've got a really good example here behind me. I'll just show you this. So on this side here, you can see we've got coming up here this whole row of carrots, and then we've got a row of beets, and then on this one here we've got our salad mix. So you can see they're direct seeded, transplanted, 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 and then direct seeded here. So yeah, so that maybe just a quick look at that will show you the main difference. So when we seed stuff, it's when we want stuff really close together. So in here, the carrots, you know, we're planting stacks of them really close together because they've got a really long root, really narrow, so it doesn't take up much space. And if we was to transplant that, we couldn't get them close enough together. I mean, we could use 50mm pots, and it's a lot of spare time. So spacing is one of the main things that we talk about when we're transplanting. If we want them really close together, we'll direct seed. If we want a bit further apart, we can transplant. You can also direct seed further apart, and some people do. But then that gets us to our next point, and the next point is what sort of root system is it going to have? So if you want to transplant, you're going to have to be aware, specifically with the plugs, not so much with the paper pots as I mentioned, but the root system is going to develop. If you can direct seed a seed into the ground, it's going to develop a really big long taproot, and it'll go down really deeply. Now, by chance, we eat the taproot of the carrot. So if you transplant a carrot, I know there is some guys that do it, but we've never had really good success because you'll often find that the roots will split, or they'll go skewed, or they won't grow really well. They don't develop that really strong taproot. Even if you transplant them really, really young, that disturbance of that root leaves problems. So, you know, for stuff like lettuce that have a shallow taproot, you know, your brassicas have a fairly shallow taproot. They're more surface feeders as opposed to taprooters. We will typically transplant as opposed to seeding. Now, on the front of your beets, which are also got a big taproot, well, the paper pot transplanter was actually originally developed for sugar beets. So you can do beets, but as you may know or may not know, a sugar beet is very similar to a beetroot, and so they're not really deep. They've got that root that goes down, but if that's disturbed, it doesn't matter too much as long as they can get their beet on the top. You know, they don't usually get much more round than this. It's not a real big issue. Okay, which then our next question is money. So when you do a transplant, you have to be aware that you're putting a whole extra step in your process. So in the process of seeding, you put your seed in the ground, that's it, you're done. Whereas when you're transplanting, you're seeding and then you're transplanting. So you've just added a whole extra step to the process, which isn't used if you're direct seeding. So that comes down to cost. So you think about the labour time it does to transplant. I mean, the paper pot planter makes it really quick, but even so, you still have to have that time and effort. If you're doing the plug transplanting, so we'll use plugs. Just a quick plug on the plugs. We don't have any plug transplants. Oh, we do. We've got our Swiss chard right up the front here that we just manually transplant because it's a crop that we get over a long time. But when it comes to the paper pot, you've got a cost involved. So on average, each pot is about $2. I equate $2 to $5. 2 cents. 2 to 5 cents. Sorry about that. 2 to 5 cents per seedling. Now, if you got something like a spring onion, you sell a bunch for $2 or $3, and you got 7 in a bunch. You take that all out 2 cents each. It just doesn't come out economically viable because you have to take your harvest time out there, your farm time, your garden time, all this sort of stuff comes together. So yeah, that's an issue you have to take in consideration. Whereas if a head of broccoli you can get $4 for, and it costs you 2 cents for the transplant, who cares? It saves heaps of time with being in the ground for transplanting. And that is our last point that I'd like to probably quickly mention, is our transplanting, our time to harvest. So your broccoli, I mentioned this in the video last time as well, but your broccoli, for example, so you can see this broccoli, it's probably going to get a head on it in the next 2 or 3 weeks. It only spends approximately 2 months in the ground. Now, if it also spends about a month in the nursery over there, and so if we had that broccoli in that ground for that extra month, we have to divide the total profit of this bed per broccoli. So doing some quick numbers here, we can put on here, we've got 150 mil spacings, and we've got the full length of the bed. So it's about a bed and a half is one pot. So let's say roughly it's about 300 seedlings on a bed, roughly. And if we get $4 a head per that seedling, that's $1,200 of broccoli on this one bed. So 1,200 divided by 8, which is how many broccoli we've got on there, divided by the amount of weeks it takes to harvest, is going to give us approximately $150. So that means that one bed there is earning us $150 a week. Now, we haven't taken into account turnover times, soil amendment times, cover crop, in the summertime. And this really, the broccoli, we're only going to be doing that over the course of 9 months. So it's not necessarily all year. But you take that into factor. If we had to divide it, instead of by 8 weeks, we divided it by an extra 4 weeks on top of that. So 12 weeks, it would drop down to $100 a week, which would be that $50 of profit less a week. Now you multiply that by the amount of beds we got here. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 irrigators here, and between each of them we've got 5 beds, so that's 25, and we've got double-sided, so that's 50. So 50 on a 50 multiplied by 150 is going to give us 7,500, which is what the profit is capable of pulling out of this garden a week if we're running straight broccoli. So the money side of things is a heavy factor into why we'd transplant and not direct seed. I did say the last one was the last one, but I just remembered we've got the other last one. Well, this is the last one. But if you look here, this is a really good example. Transplanting is really good for weed pressure. So you can see here we've got a really bad problem with nutgrass. This is the first year we've ever worked this soil. So this here is virgin soil. We last year we did like the first 6 or 8 beds on both sides, and you can see they're a lot cleaner. but coming down this way, you can see we've got a lot more weed pressure, massive amount of weed pressure. Now you can see how big these broccoli are right now. So these broccoli are going to start fleshing out very soon, and as you can see over here, they're the cauliflower. But these broccoli here are 2 weeks older than them, so that's the only difference between them two. And you can see that that canopy is already coming out, and it's starting to choke out the weeds. We've had a bit of wind and they've blown them over. But what that'll do is it'll decrease the pressure of the weeds. So because they had such a head on the weeds, they're already established and growing, they can outcompete the weeds. And we don't have to necessarily worry so much about weeding. This year what we'll do is we'll tarp it all, and that should kill a lot of that nut grass out in the summer. Whereas on this side, you know, if we had these, we just have these beetroot here and the weeds are already coming up now, they're not going to be able to compete. So that means we have to weed this garden a lot more heavily to be able to get our product out of the ground. Now, to have the amount of weeds we have in here is not recommendable. However, it's just what we have, and we're working on it, you know, and as time goes on, we will go getting rid of the weeds with the Clydesdale and tarping and whatever methods we need to use to get rid of them. Okay, and just before I went to edit the video, I was like, oh damn, there's one point I missed. And I thought I'd better do a quick video and talk to you about that. So the most important possibly, and I forgot it, the fifth reason, which will determine whether you transplant or seed, is climate. Now, this is the massive advantage of transplanting. You can keep your seedlings in a climate controlled room and then get them out in the field. So the exact same crops will do different things. So wintertime now, we'll do beetroots transplant. Another factor is because we can get we'll do winter direct seed for our beetroot because we can get a really good strike rate. Summertime, however, it's really hard to keep the water up to it. So what happens is they just won't strike as well if they strike at all. Whereas we can transplant them, so we seed them in the paper pots, and then we drag them out in the transplant, and we can have beetroots when most of the local farmers don't have them. So your climate is a really heavy dictator on that as well, and also on the other side of things, you know, if it's too, like now it's too cold for our watermelons, our cucurbits, so we can put the watermelons in transplants. We wouldn't put them in a paper pot, but we put them in a plug tray, and then when probably in 2 or 3 weeks time, you know, we're mid-September and mid to late September, we can get them straight out into the field and be ahead of the competition again. Yeah, that's it for this show, guys. I hope it's been informative, interesting, and you guys have learnt more about how we decide what we seed and what we transplant. I just went in a little bit into the numbers there on profitability and market garden. I want to do a whole separate video on how you can calculate your profitability of a market garden. Other thing we didn't take into account is we took a little bit into account bed flips and stuff, but you know, losses, you know, we run at about a 10 to 20% loss rate on a bed depending on what crop it is and the time of the year, and also, you know, external factors like if we get a big flood here or whatever, you know, we got 100% write-off, but you know, them sort of things. So I want to go in another video really detailing that sort of stuff and how we work it. So if you guys are looking at starting your own market garden, or if you have one, you know, maybe a bit more information to get you going. So yeah, I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope that sorts out your seeding and transplanting queries. And next week we want to show you another avenue that we have of sales, and we want to talk about our sales and how we get this product to market into the consumer's hands and get it moving. So thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're new to this channel. If you're one of our faithful followers, really appreciate it. It means a lot to us. And hit that bell button. And if you think you have a friend who's thinking about gardening or farming or whatever, by all means, let them know that we exist and tell them to come over and like and subscribe. Thanks again and have a good week, guys. So this is a week on from that seeding. And as my mum always used to say, what's done in the dark is seen in the daylight. And you can see there, we bit of a wonky thing there, and we've had some bandicoots here digging holes in the garden. The bandicoots, what do you do with them? But no, it's not too bad. All in all, it's not too bad for our first seeding of rocket. And I think we got our, what do we have down here? Our beetroots coming up. No, it's our baby spinach. You can see just starting to come up through the dirt there. I don't know if you can see that. So yeah, no, looking good.